Berlin, East Germany. 7:35 p.m., November 12, 1979. The air in the cramped Prenzlauer Berg apartment was thick with the smell of boiled potatoes and damp wool. 16-year-old Franziska Schreiber hunched over the small kitchen table, her brow furrowed in concentration. The glow from a single overhead bulb cast long shadows across her open notebook. Her assignment for her brand civics class was due tomorrow. Analyze the dialectical relationship between the individual and the collective in our socialist society. It was the kind of vague, ideological prompt she loathed. With a sigh, she reached for her father's briefcase, left carelessly on chair. He was a mid-level functionary in the Ministry of Foreign Trade, often bringing work home. Maybe, she thought, his papers would contain some suitably dry, bureaucratic phrasing she could borrow to pad out her essay. What she pulled out, however, was not a ministerial memo. It was a thin, black, leather-bound notebook. It felt cold and personal. Flipping it open, she expected lists of import quotas or factory production figures. Instead, she found neat, cryptic columns. Dates, times, initials, and sums of money. West German Deutschmarks, not East German Ostmarks, next to names she vaguely recognized. Local journalists, a pastor from the nearby church, the owner of the corner grocery who always seemed to have scarce oranges. Her eyes scanned the pages, her homework forgotten. One entry, just 2 weeks old, made her blood run cold. It read, KB, confirmed delivery of cultural materials, C-file lyric. Payment, 1,500 DM. Remark, subject's daughter, F, shows concerning independence of thought. Monitor, KB Kultberger, her history teacher, and F. That was her best friend, Felicity. Franziska's heart hammered against her ribs. This was no trade document. This was a ledger of betrayal. In that moment, in the silent kitchen, the carefully constructed reality of her world. The young pioneer meetings, the slogans about collective trust, the ever-present portrait of Erich Honecker on the classroom wall, shattered. She was holding, she realized with dawning horror, what appeared to be a Stasi informant's record book. And the informant was her own father. This single, mundane act of a schoolgirl seeking to cheat on her homework would become the first, fragile thread in a tapestry of deception, courage, and resistance. It would inadvertently initiate Operation Schneeflocke, Snowflake, a grassroots investigation led not by seasoned dissidents or Western spies, but by a terrified, furious teenager and her closest friends, a probe that would, over the coming months, expose Geister, Circle of Ghosts, one of the Stasi's most effective and deeply embedded spy networks in East Berlin. The silent army of the unseen. To understand the magnitude of what Franziska had stumbled upon, one must first comprehend the omnipresent, chilling efficiency of the Ministerium für Staatssicherheit, the Stasi. It was not merely a secret police force. It was the central nervous system of the German Democratic Republic, GDR. By 1979, the Stasi employed over 91,000 full-time officers and cultivated a network of nearly 200,000 inoffizielle Mitarbeiter, IAMs, unofficial collaborators or informants. Their motto, Schild und die Schwert der Partei, shield and sword of the party, was no empty boast. Their goal was die Total Erfassung, the total recording of the population's every thought, relationship, and potential descent. The Circle of Ghosts was a masterpiece of this perverse philosophy. Unlike networks targeting high-level defectors or government secrets, the ghosts had a more subtle, insidious purpose: social atomization. Their mission was to infiltrate and poison the very bedrock of community life in key Berlin districts, apartment blocks, workplaces, schools, churches, and even sports clubs. The network's IAMs were not shadowy figures in trench coats. They were the chatty neighbor who borrowed sugar and reported on your moods, the sympathetic union rep who documented complaints, the diligent teacher, like her burger, who noted which students asked challenging questions. The ghost's objective was to prevent the formation of any independent collective thought, to ensure that the only dialectical relationship between the individual and the state was one of total submission. They created a climate of profound paranoia where trust became a lethal liability. A misplaced joke, a sigh of frustration in a queue, a request for a Western record, all could be logged, cross-referenced, and filed away in the Stasi's vast archives in Normanstrasse, potentially ruining careers, educational prospects, and lives years later. Franziska's father, Gunther Schreiber, IM, codename Der Buchhalter, the accountant, was a crucial node. His position in foreign trade granted him a plausible cover for receiving Western currency. His ledger didn't just record payments, it mapped the network's reach. Each initial was a ghost, embedded in the fabric of everyday life. The homework group that became a resistance cell. Paralyzed by fear, Franziska did not immediately confront her father. Instead, she did something instinctive. She sought confirmation and counsel. The next day at school, under the pretense of studying for a physics test, she showed the notebook to two people she trusted implicitly. Felicity Berger, F., from a ledger, whose father was implicated, and Thomas Weber, a lanky, fiercely intelligent boy whose family had a history of run-ins with the authorities. Their study session in the dusty school library became a war council. Thomas, pale as he deciphered the entries, confirmed their worst fears. "This is Zersitzung," he whispered, using the Stasi term for their psychological decomposition tactics. "They're not just watching, they're breaking connections. My uncle," they drove him to a breakdown by spreading rumors, sending anonymous letters. "This is how they do it. These names," he pointed a trembling finger, "are the ones planting the seeds." Their teenage rebellion transformed in that moment. It was no longer about music or blue jeans. It was about survival. With the acute perception of those who have grown up under surveillance, they devised a plan of breathtaking audacity and caution. They would not flee, nor openly accuse. They would investigate the investigators. They became Schneeflocke. The name was Franziska's idea. Individually, a snowflake is fragile, insignificant. But together, in a blizzard, they can paralyze a system. Their operation was built on the principle of radical compartmentalization. Franziska, as the source, would continue to monitor her father's briefcase, memorizing details, never photocopying. Access to a copier was itself suspicious. Thomas, a photography enthusiast with a homemade darkroom, was put in charge of surveillance and dead drops. Felicity, leveraging her position as the subject's daughter, would become an actress of flawless conformity, while gently probing her father for inconsistencies. Their tools were those of their environment. School notebooks with coded messages hidden in homework answers. Meeting points established during sanctioned young pioneer hiking trips. Signals using classroom blinds or specific books carried under the arm. They mapped the ghosts not with high-tech gear, but with observation, memory, and a growing, chilling dossier of connections. They identified the grocer, IM Obsthandler, who reported on who bought Western goods, the pastor's lay assistant, IM Globager, who monitored confessionals, a nurse at the local clinic, IM Schwester, who documented injuries that might suggest protest or escape attempts. The psychological toll was immense. Franziska had to sit across from her father every evening, swallowing her disgust, playing the oblivious daughter. Felicity wrestled with the betrayal of a parent she loved. Thomas lived in constant fear that his photographic activities would be discovered. The weight of their secret was a suffocating presence, a second skin they could never shed. The blizzard gathers when he observed turn the tables. The breakthrough came not from a dramatic intercept, but from a pattern observed in mundanity. Thomas, tasked with discreetly following Der Buchhalter, noticed his father always visited a specific neep pub on Tuesday nights. Not to drink, but to use the public telephone in the back hallway. It was a classic Stasi tradecraft, using uncontrolled public phones for sensitive calls to avoid wiretaps on home lines. Armed with this, Schneeflocke made its first calculated risk. They needed a voice. They needed proof that went beyond a ledger whose provenance could be denied. Using funds painstakingly saved from birthdays and school allowances, they purchased a cheap, bulky voice-activated tape recorder from the hard currency inter shop, a risky transaction that itself could have drawn attention. On a frigid Tuesday in January 1980, Tomas, shrouded in a scarf and hat, entered the NEEP an hour early. He secured the booth next to the phone, his school bag strategically placed on the shared bench, the recorder hidden inside, microphone pressed against the thin wood partition. The wait felt eternal. The smell of beer and smoke clung to him. When Gunter Schreiber finally entered, Franziska's father, the man who read her bedtime stories, his voice was cold, clipped, utterly foreign. The tape captured only one side of the conversation, but it was damning. Verification on subject Weber, Tomas. Weekly photographic chemical purchases consistent. Association with Schreiber daughter confirmed. Recommend. Initiate Phase 2 Zersitzung for family unit. Father's workplace audit pending. A pause. Payment for Obsthandler and Globager authorized. Schwester reports no anomalies from clinic. The Burger Girl remains compliant. Yes, the cultural materials were effective. The poetry group has disbanded. The tape was their smoking gun. But to whom could they give it? Going to the authorities was the authorities. The police, the courts, all answered to the Stasi. Western journalists were inaccessible, their contacts watched. An approach to the West German embassy would be immediate grounds for arrest. In their desperation, they turned to the only seemingly incorruptible system they knew, the church. Not the compromised state-sanctioned church, but the grassroots, often protected, Protestant community centered around the Friedenskirche, Church of Peace. They anonymously mailed a copy of the tape and a decoded summary of the ledger to Pastor Albrecht, a man known for quiet defiance. They included a single, typed line, "The ghosts walk among us." These are their names. The unraveling. What happened next was a chain reaction that surpassed the teenagers' wildest hopes and darkest fears. Pastor Albrecht, understanding the explosive nature of the materials, did not keep it within the GDR. Through a clandestine courier network used to smuggle Bibles and Samizdat literature, the dossier was spirited across the border to West Berlin. There, it landed on the desk of a Reuters correspondent. On March 18, 1980, the story broke in the West German magazine Der Spiegel with a thunderous headline, "The Ghosts of Prenzlauer Berg, How the Stasi Turns a Neighborhood into an Army of Informers." The article named names, quoted the tape transcript, and detailed the Zersitzung methods. It was a propaganda catastrophe for the GDR, which had long claimed the Stasi was a defensive shield against Western aggression, not a weapon turned on its own citizenry. The backlash was immediate and brutal, but not in the way Schneeflocke had anticipated. The Stasi, in damage control mode, could not afford a public trial that would validate the Western reports. Instead, they moved with silent, administrative viciousness. Overnight, the named informants, including Gunter Schreiber and Kurt Berger, were relieved of their duties. Their families were forcibly relocated to remote towns. Franziska and Felicity never saw each other again. Tomas's father was dismissed from his engineering post on fabricated charges of negligence. The Stasi, ironically, assumed the leak had come from a high-level defector or a compromised officer. The idea that it originated from a schoolgirl's homework assignment was so absurd, so outside their model of threat assessment, that it never occurred to them. Their internal investigation, File 4 Gang Schneeflocke, focused on ministerial staff and foreign contacts. The three teenagers, though subjected to increased, generalized surveillance, were never directly linked to the catastrophe that had engulfed their families and community. The Cold Dawn, legacy of the Snowflakes. The Circle of Ghosts was dismantled, its members scattered and disgraced within the system they served. The network's exposure sent a shockwave of panic through the Stasi's vast IM apparatus. If a network this deeply embedded could be unmasked, who was safe? It fostered a climate of mutual suspicion among informants themselves, slightly eroding the trust that was the glue of the surveillance state. For Franziska, Tomas, and Felicity, there was no victory parade. They carried the scars in silence. Franziska, racked with guilt over destroying her family, became a librarian, finding solace in the silent, ordered world of books. Tomas, forever wary of lenses and film, became a mechanic. Felicity, after years of struggle, eventually emigrated to the West in 1989, just before the wall fell. Their story, pieced together from Stasi files discovered after German reunification and from their own reluctant testimonies, stands as a potent allegory for resistance in an age of total surveillance. They wielded no weapons, published no manifesto, and led no rallies. Their power lay in observation, in the preservation of genuine human trust in a system designed to extinguish it, and in the courage to act upon a truth discovered by accident. The final, chilling entry in the Stasi's own Schneeflocke investigation file, closed in 1981 due to lack of actionable evidence, reads, "Source of leak remains unidentified. Methodology suggests sophisticated Western intelligence intervention. The vulnerability of social control networks to external manipulation is noted for future structural review." They never knew. They never suspected that the blizzard that froze their prized network was started by a few fragile, brave snowflakes, triggered on a cold Berlin evening by a teenager just trying to finish her homework. The ultimate subversion was not in grand defiance, but in the simple, terrifying act of seeing the invisible web and, with trembling hands, choosing to cut a single, crucial thread.